Andy Hampson, an American on an American team, is trying to beat the European system and steal the Tour de France. Stephen Roche is a product of Europe. He is the rightful heir to the crown. Once compared to cycling immortals, Laurent Fignon has won twice before. He wants his place in history. Would it have been Greg LeMond again? We'll never know. He was shot in a hunting accident. 207 of the best professional cyclists in the world have begun their 2,500-mile journey to Paris. Among them is an American with a mission. Andy Hampson, fourth last year, said goodbye to his French team and brings his own American team to the Tour. Irishman Stephen Roche comes on with possibly the best team in cycling. Back from injury, Roche may prove unstoppable this year. CBS Sports is proud to bring you the Tour de France. Welcome to the starting line here in Berlin for the 2,500-mile journey to Paris. Hello, everybody. I'm John Dockery, and this is the Tour de France, the greatest bike race on earth. The finest professional riders from around the world are gathered here. Now, most of the race is contested in stages out on the road in 150-mile segments. But today, it's what the French call the race of truth. Time trial, man against the clock, just under 4 miles, all by himself. Now, the Tour won't be won or lost here in Berlin, but a rider can set the tone and let the others know that he's ready. So the race to Paris begins here in Berlin. In the shadow of the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church, thousands here to see the first stage of the Tour, the prologue time trial. 207 riders from 23 teams on a 3.8-mile dash through the streets of Berlin. For most of the 24 stages in the Tour de France, the 9-man teams ride together. But today, each rider faces the challenge alone. A test of nerves as much as speed. Solitary moments serve as private preparation for this first and shortest of the 3 individual time trials. A special start house complete with a short ramp is in place. The riders leave one after another, 60 seconds apart. Now this is an all-out sprint against the clock, so a carefully planned warm-up is a must for every athlete. The American 7-Eleven team uses a treadmill to help pump oxygen to their soon-to-be-tested muscles. An air pump does the same for the bikes. American Ron Kiefel, waiting for his turn, takes time to sign a last-minute autograph. Meantime, Czechoslovakian-born Milan Jurko, riding with an Italian team, starts early on. The early starters are not usually considered contenders. The fastest riders may start almost 4 hours later. But this day, Jurko burns the course with a blistering 7-minute, 14-second sprint, a mark which should stand for a full hour and a half. Ron Kiefel is now ready for his battle with the clock. His wife, Darcy, captures the anxious moment on film. Kiefer is off on his dash against the clock and against himself. The 27-year-old Colorado native is one of the founding members of the American team. Kiefer has seen the 7-Eleven team go from being the brunt of European cycling humor to a respected professional team. Though the distance is short in this first day prologue, the impression left can be a lasting one. The team support car lets Kiefer know his split times and what he has to do to catch the current best. As Kiefer rides on, the American team leader Andy Hampsten prepares for his date with the clock about an hour later. Ron Kiefer is one of the best time trialists on the American team. But on this hot, humid, sticky day, he arrives at the finish empty. His time not good enough to overtake the leader Yurko. Out of breath and exhausted and completely spent, he still finds enough air to ask his coach the all-important question. No, my time was? No. Many of the team leaders are still to come, including Andy Hampsten, who wants to make a strong statement on this first day of the Tour de France. For Kiefer, a race a bit too long, his time 13 seconds behind the leader. He's shorter. I died so bad in that last kilometer. Did you? The stars will soon be out for their battle with the clock.
150 years ago really was something quite special. It was probably the equivalent of owning a Rolls-Royce today. And there was no shortage of imagination in design, and things in 1987, it seems, just haven't changed. When the East Germans produced the first of the new breed of speed machine, designers raced ahead. Until about 8 years ago, this was the state of the art in Tour de France cycling, the regular diamond-shaped bicycle for use in all stages in the race. Now take a look how things have changed. This is the new bicycle now for all the time trial stages in the race, such as this afternoon's prologue time trial. You can probably see the difference. It's totally aerodynamically designed. The sloping top tube here, the upturned handlebars to keep the rider with his regular racing position. The flattened spokes for slicing through the air. The front wheel, in fact, 1 inch smaller than the back wheel here. And this itself was sheeted with graphite. Although the wheel is heavier, once it's rolling, it really does go quite quickly. The bicycle is shaped like an arrowhead, built for speed, because the Tour de France these days can be won by the fractions of a second, and this is the bike that might do the job. If you want to buy one at home, though, I'm afraid the price isn't quite so streamlined. It'll probably cost you in the region of $3,500. The near 4 miles prologue time trial that opens the Tour de France is a short sprint, with each rider taking his turn. But if you miss your start time, you go when you can. Milan Yurko had set the target time, but then came a determined effort from rival Eastern Bloc rider, Poland's Lech Piasecki. There are no Eastern Bloc teams in the race, but a handful of riders have permission to race in the West. Piasecki, who won the World Amateur title in 1985, was traded to an Italian professional team for a supply of racing bikes to Poland. Now, with the fastest time, he seemed a good investment. But the stars are still to go. Andy Hampsten from the United States. Laurent Fignon, the great French hope and twice a winner. Phil Anderson, the Australian, fighting back from injury. Stephen Roach from Ireland, third 2 years ago. this is perhaps the most important tour ever for Phil Anderson, he's anxious to prove that he can come back after suffering from hereditary arthritic disease in his back. Last year was a tough one for the Australian, and there were many who said he would never race at this level again. But at least memories of a great career will help his return. In 1981, Anderson became the first Australian to wear the yellow jersey, and he finished 10th. He did it again in 1982, and this time he finished 5th. So 1983 was supposed to be his year, but he was reduced to the role of domestique for the popular Frenchman Pascal Simon. A victim of injuries and politics, he's hoping now to make his return. Anderson's 29, and time is running out. All of France is hoping for a return to form of Laurent Fignon this month. Like Anderson, Fignon has suffered a serious setback to his career. He's fought against a damaged Achilles tendon throughout 1985 after withdrawing from the Tour de France. Then in 1986, a broken collarbone was another setback. But this year, he has shown signs of full recovery, and the 26-year-old Parisian finished 3rd in the Tour of Spain. To win the race in his own back garden of Paris. He did it in 1983 and 84. But after 2 such wins, he was to become another Tour statistic. As last year, he struggled behind the rest in the Pyrenees. He abandoned the race, saying he was sick. This year, Fignon will need the valued support of top team manager Cyril Guimard. But it's Fignon now who hopes to turn a corner and see his career go back to the top. Anderson completes his time trial, and it has clearly hurt the Australian. He's also failed by just 23 seconds to match Piers Secchi. It's Andy Hampsten's turn to enter the start house. While on the other side of the road, Laurent Fignon approaches the line. With the confidence drawn from last week's victory in the Tour of Switzerland, Hampsten makes ready. While Fignon's effort is almost over. But his time, 27 seconds behind, is not so good. Lungful of air. And to a cheer, Hampsten launches into the race. After Greg LeMond gave the United States a first ever victory last year, Hampsten carries a great responsibility this time in LeMond's enforced absence. The 26-year-old from North Dakota has had a meteoric rise to fame after winning the Tour of Switzerland for the first time last year. Hampsten is now on the American 7-11 team. But in last year's Tour de France, he was alongside Greg LeMond on the same French La Vie Claire squad. Hampsten possesses the most wanted talent of all the ability to climb mountains and fast. He helped pave the way for Greg LeMond to win the Tour last year when he paced him in the Pyrenees, where LeMond moved to within 40 seconds behind the leader, Bernard Hinault. Hampsten finished 4th and won the white jersey of best newcomer in last year's Tour. But he became a star in his own right last week when he won the Tour of Switzerland for a second time. Hampsten's aim this year is to be the first American to win on an American team. But at the finish, there's about to be a new leader, as prologue specialist Jelle Naidem from Holland sets the best time, and this will be his 4th prologue victory of the season. Hampsten comes home with one of the best times of the top contenders for final victory. He's not really a time trial specialist, and he's anxious to prove to his opponents and himself he has the all-round talent to win the Tour. But his time this time is 20 seconds behind Naidem. The performances by Neidham, however, will not concern Hampsten because he can't climb well enough to win the Tour. But Stephen Roche certainly can, and he aims to win the prologue. Roche turned professional in 1981 and won 10 major races. But since his third place in the Tour de France 2 years ago, he too has suffered setbacks through injury. But in Roche's case, no one doubts that he has fully returned to his best condition. But Roche is an Irishman now on an Italian team. Yet, last month he became the first Irishman to win the Tour of Italy, a race only 300 miles shorter than the Tour de France. And he did it despite aggression from his own team. 2 years ago, Roche heard all as Greg LeMond, an American on a French team, was ordered not to win the Tour de France and wait for Bernard Hinault, who's falling behind. Perhaps Roche learned then to look after number one. Start house is Jean-Francois Bernard, France's young rising star. But when the French look in the start house, they don't see Jean-Francois Bernard. They still see Bernard Hinault. Bernard finished 12th last year and admits he has still a lot to learn, and all France will watch his mistakes. Roche won the Tour of Italy in spite of hostility against him, but now with a rare double in sight he makes an almost perfect start and narrowly fails to take the lead in this opening time trial. Just Jean-Francois Bernard to finish, and his entourage, of course. Roche has made a supreme effort. There's nothing hurts more than the race of truth, and the clock never lies. Now it's Bernard's turn to finish, and the Frenchman has not disgraced himself. And in a last burst to the line, the Frenchman's time is only 9 seconds behind Neidham, who wins in his third Tour de France, his first ever stage of the race. Lech Piasecki of Poland was second. And of the stars, Bernard didn't do too badly, but Andy Hampsten was only 20 seconds behind, Ron Kiefel 21. So as the crowd gathers round to see the first yellow jersey of 1987 presented, a special star appears. Rather overweight perhaps, but Bernard Hinault is still here. We'll be right back after this break.
When you think of Berlin, you probably think of a bustling metropolis. But Berlin is also a city of rivers, lakes, and canals, and parks where families can play. Berlin is also a city rich in history. This year they celebrate their 750th birthday. In Europe, Berlin is a mecca for young artists, and a masterpiece just might be found painted on the sidewalk. There are elegant Baroque buildings reminiscent of another time when German royalty ruled the land. Very few of these buildings remain today. Most were lost in the war. West Berlin is what you might call an economic miracle. At least that's what they called it back in the 60s and the 50s when these buildings were constructed. And this is East Berlin. The wall built in 1962 still divides East and West, and reminds us of those who tried to cross that wall. Berlin has its monument to peace, but its history is one of being torn apart by war. Adolf Hitler used the 1936 Olympics as a propaganda tool to fan the flames of war. Berlin was left in shambles by the ravages of the conflict. After the war was over, Berlin isolated